Andrew Rashid with Alliance Solutions Group, and tonight we're going to be walking through Acumatica for construction. I'm going to do a quick overview of some of the construction features. Then we're going to go right into the workflow example that you had requested that I complete. So let's go ahead and get started. When you log into Acumatica, you're greeted with this home screen. And one of the great ease of use features in the system is the ability for the user to tailor the menu of these applications to meet their specific needs. So when I can turn on and off different menu applications that I may or may not need or have access to. In addition to that, as I click on the application, it's going to expose a menu that's similar to the applications I have the ability to tailor to my individual needs and requirements for my work. So each individual in the organization is going to be able to tailor their workspace to their role in the business. In addition to that, over to the right-hand side of my home screen is this dashboard. And each individual in the organization is going to be able to select a dashboard that provides them with their specific informational requirements. And these dashboards can be configured as well. I can come in here, remove widgets that I don't care to see. I can tailor them to filter data the way I want to see it. And I can organize them in the order of priority for me. So again, just a really great way to come in and get just the meaningful data that you need to run your day. Within these dashboards, they don't just hold graphical details, but also information through what we call queries. And I can drill into these queries, much like you might do in a report. And when I drill into these queries, it does open up on a separate tab the detail behind this dashboard. So when I clicked in these open committed costs here, it went ahead and drilled into the committed costs that sit behind that data. And what's great about these queries is similar to the dashboard. I have the ability to filter the data that I'm looking at on the fly, or I could choose to save that filter. So every time I come in here, it's slicing and dicing the data the way I want to see it. So for example, I have this query set up to filter automatically when I come into it to show me all of the commitments that are open and have a balance of greater than $50,000. So when I click that tab, it's resorting my data to give me that information. Or maybe I'd like to filter my data to separate out all of my material purchases. Again, I'm just a mouse click away from getting that data. And again, I could drill into the individual transactions from here. It's a very powerful way to get into your details of anything you have a question on. Last thing I'll mention is I can take any view that I'm looking at and quickly and easily drop it into a spreadsheet. So even though I'm in a web application, I do have the ability to click on that Excel box. It's going to take the data as I see it, filtered and everything, and it's going to go ahead and download it right into a spreadsheet for me. Now, when I open up this spreadsheet, it's not a comma delimited file. It's actually a full-blown workbook, fully formatted. So I can take my data offline and work on it as I see fit. And so some just real good productivity tools there. Let's just quickly touch on some of the other features that are available in the Construction Edition. We have the ability to issue subcontracts, manage your change orders. You also have the ability to do purchase orders and manage your projects. When we open up a project in here, Acumatica did a great job consolidating all these data points into a single screen. And so when you look at your project screen, it's not only a screen where we would go and just set up the basics about the project. But it also is a source of a wealth of information about the project. So say, for example, I wanted to look at my schedule of values on the job. Again, I'm just one mouse click away. I just go over to revenue budget, and right there is my entire schedule of values for the project. But not only that, as data gets input throughout the system, it is all pulled back in here and driven into almost like a report type format, which again, I could drop right into a spreadsheet. If your estimating system produces your schedule of values for you, you could of course upload it right in here. All you have to do is get it into an Excel spreadsheet, and then you can just upload it here, so you did not need to manually enter your schedule of values. You also have the ability to look at your budget. Same thing goes here. If my estimating package creates my budget, I could just upload that budget into Acumatica. As is the case with the revenue budget, I have a complete recap of my budget versus actual right here. I can drop that into Excel. Another really neat thing I could do is not just look at my budget by cost code. I can quickly just click this guy here, and it's going to regroup my budget now by division. So quickly, easily look at my data at a detail level or at a summary level. And I, of course, could drill into my transactions or commitments here. As I move across, I could also see a list of all my change orders on this project, drill into those. I can also come over here, get a commitment log, see the status, filter what I'm looking at, and drill into the individual records. I could even skip a step and say I wanted to look at the signed contract agreement for the sub. I can just get it right from here. I don't even need to drill into the transaction. I could just drill into it from the log. Last but not least, I can come over here and get almost like a P&L on the performance on the project. That data is available to be placed into Excel. I can drill into the detail. But this project is almost like your command center, or you could just work off of your dashboard. So those are just a couple of quick things that I wanted to touch on as it related to the construction edition. Now let's talk about the specific workflow that you had requested, which was the creation of a commitment, taking that commitment, routing it for approval, driving that commitment into an AP invoice, again, routing that for approval, and ultimately setting that to be paid. So let's get started. As I log in here, again, I'm greeted with that dashboard. We're going to go ahead and go over to purchases, and we're going to issue a purchase order for dumpster rental. So we're going to pretend that we've got the need to rent a dumpster on one of our upcoming projects. In order to do that, I'm going to create a purchase order. Now, when I come into my purchase order view, you'll notice that I'm greeted with a log of all my POs, which I could group, sort, filter, and search. So if I wanted to search for POs to a specific vendor, just start typing the vendor's name, and it does best fit. And it just continues to hunt for everyone that meets that criteria. Again, today, we're here to talk about creating a new purchase order. I'm just going to click this plus. That's going to open up a PO for me. And so to get started, all I have to do is go ahead and select the vendor. Now, as a side note, if this was a brand new vendor to our organization, if I wanted to, I could drill down into the vendor record without leaving my work and create a new vendor on the fly. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and just start typing the vendor I know I want to use. Again, it will search for the best fit, call that up. I just select it. It populates the information. I'm going to go ahead and just put in the description dumpster rental. I'm going to go down into the grid, hit plus. Another just quick note, you might be wondering what branch is. A branch is if I'm using multiple divisions and or intercompany accounting, I could indicate which company is buying these goods or services. I'm just going to leave that as is. Move over here. I'm going to start typing dumpster. I've pre-built an item in my database for dumpster rental. I'm going to go ahead and pick that. One thing I will mention, just come back over here, there is a lookup window, and you could, do a search across the database. All right. So here we just would pick the project. Again, it's a search function. I'm just going to go ahead and just fill something in. Same thing with the cost code, line description came on in. The unit of measure, that's user defined. Probably I could have done month there. In this case, I just did each. We're going to forecast the need for this dumpster to be here 6 months. That will calculate against the unit cost, automatically total that up for me. I'm ready to save the purchase order. Now, if I needed to override the unit cost, I certainly could do that. If my vendor gave me a list of items and I wanted to upload it to the PO, I could do that as well. But in this particular example, we're ready to go. We're going to go ahead and save it. Now, depending on your workflow, someone else may or may not need to review this before we send it off to route for approval. In this particular case, I'm signed in as an administrator, which means I play the role of all people. So I'm going to remove this off hold, and what you'll notice is now it changes the status to pending approval. So when I save this, what that's doing now is that's opened up the ability to approve it or reject it. Now, before I removed it off hold, what would have happened, so I'll put it back on hold for a minute, you'll notice I am unable to do anything with this purchase order. I cannot email it to the vendor. I can't approve and reject. So it is totally locked in. In other words, it needs an approval. So I'm going to take that off hold. You'll notice now again, it's changed the actions. So if I have the rights to approve it, and it's been routed to me, I could mark it as such. So let's pretend for a minute that I am the purchasing manager and that purchase order is going to come to me for approval. Now I could do that from my phone, but I went ahead and set up a dashboard for a purchasing manager. And on that dashboard, there should be a purchase order pending my approval. And in fact, there is. It's right here. So on my dashboard, I could go through all these widgets, and in this case, drill into that pending purchase order. When I do that, it calls up my log of all of my pending approvals. So obviously, I just have one. If I had many, they would all be listed here. From there, I just drill into the purchase order, and it opens up another record. Again, if I had dual monitors, I could drag and drop that over to another monitor. And at this point, I go up to actions and I mark it approved. Now that I've done that, if I go over to my approval details, you'll notice in the audit trail, it does say, hey, this has been approved, done by Baker Maxwell, and this is the date that it was done on. So now that that purchase order has been approved, you'll notice new actions have happened. So now that it's been approved, I'm ready to go ahead and email it over to the vendor. And the way Acumatica works is I can set up default email templates so that all I have to do is click email purchase order. And what that's going to do is automatically email, in this case, my go-to vendor, a copy of that purchase order. In addition to that, the system has maintained an audit trail of that communication. So when I come up to activities, you'll notice that there is a copy of the email stored in the system. And let's just double click on that. So I've got a copy of the email, and it has included a copy of the attachment, which was the physical PO that we sent to the vendor. And if you want to put your logo up here, you could do that. Also, when we look at the purchase order, from a workflow perspective, the next thing we would do is enter an invoice against it. Now, you might be asking, well, what if I needed more than one person to approve the purchase order? You could absolutely do that. You can have as many approvals as you need for it to go through your approval process. Ultimately, that's up to you. That's done in your settings. But in this particular case, we're ready to go to the next step. Now, I could go over into vendor management and go into an AP invoice and link that invoice to this purchase order. That's really how any system works out there, but I wanted to show you another way you could do it. I could also go there from the purchase order itself. So I could go up to Actions, and you'll notice there's Enter AP Bill. So when I come over to Enter AP Bill and just click that, what it's going to do is automatically open up accounts payable. So yes, I could have went into vendor management, opened up bills and adjustments, come down here and add the PO right here on the grid. I just took maybe a different route. For some people, it'd be a more efficient way. I went from the PO to the AP invoice. But either way that I go to enter this AP bill, what's important to note is that it will fill in the detail from the PO. And in this particular example, we're going to assume go-to vendor is going to only invoice us for a single month of dumpster rental. So I'm going to go ahead and update this to 1 month. And what you'll notice is it went ahead and changed the extended cost. If there's retainage, we would hold retainage. If you need to do a joint check, we can do a joint check. So all the typical construction workflows are here. If we need to manage compliance, we manage compliance. Everything you need to have is right here, ready to go. This example, we went ahead, entered a month of dumpster rental. We're going to go ahead and save the entry. And similar, whoops, I need to do the AP invoice. Let's go ahead and enter, we'll just do the month and the year, and we'll put a dash in so you can see you can do whatever you want there. Whatever invoice number they give you, you would go ahead and put that down. So now we're ready, and it's a similar workflow to what I showed you with the purchase order. Invoice is on hold. You are unable to do any actions until it's marked and pending approval. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and save that. Now it's pending approval. And so again, just as a reminder, I could go to my mobile phone, go into my invoices for approval, and do it there. But you know what? Before we go and approve this invoice, maybe there's a copy of the invoice that I would like to include here as some backup. So with Acumatica, you do have the ability to attach files to support this transaction. That's available throughout the whole system. This example here, we're focused on an AP invoice. It could be on a job, it could be on a change order, a subcontract, whatever. I could add a file by clicking here, browsing to wherever it's stored, and attaching it. Or if it's easier for you, I could go to where that file is stored and just drag and drop it onto the record like so. And you'll see now that invoice is stored in Acumatica that quick. I could go ahead and pull up a copy of it. Let's go back in to that invoice. And just recap a couple quick things before we mark it for approval. Again, I went ahead, I added an invoice against the PO. Brought in the details for it. I could still adjust the quantity. I went ahead and removed it from hold. Until I did that, I was unable to make any actions on the invoice. If I need to create a backup to this record, I can quickly and easily do it. And now that I've done that, it's ready for approval. Similar to what I did with the purchase order, I could do this from a dashboard. In this case here, we're going to go into the AP clerk. And you'll notice I've got all these different widgets here. But again, I've got a bill to approve. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. There it is again in my queue. I'm just going to go ahead, click and drill into it. Maybe call up a copy of the invoice if I needed to, as I showed earlier. Once I've done that, I can mark it approved, or I can reject it. When I mark it approved, now it's indicating that it's balanced, meaning that's the end of my workflow. And again, it's in the audit trail. Now, depending on your workflow, I might have auto release turned on. In this case here, I want someone to come in and do a final check and release that bill. And you'll notice before I do that, I can't pay the bill. So just an added layer of control so I can control who can and who can't pay a bill. I'm going to hit release. Now you'll notice I can go ahead and pay the bill. So we went through a workflow on creating a commitment against the project. We went through routing that for approval. We drilled down from a dashboard to mark it approved. We took that into an AP invoice, attached backup for the invoice, and then routed it for approval, ultimately getting it ready to be paid. If you have any questions, feel free to email or call, but I think that closes out the open item that we had mentioned to do. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.